Here is today's featured headline in space. Satellite manufacturer York Space Systems plans to go public. Today is November 18th, 2025, and you're listening to SpaceNews First Up. Here are today's other top headlines. China will launch an uncrewed Shenzhou spacecraft to the Tiangong space station next week to replace a damaged spacecraft. A bipartisan report concludes that the United States is at risk of losing the strategic high ground of space that underpins modern military power. German satellite component company Dcubed is moving into the in-space manufacturing field. Isar Aerospace has sold a Spectrum launch to American launch aggregator SEOPS.
First Up is produced by Space News, the industry standard for professional space journalism. Visit spacenews.com for breaking news, policy updates, and original analysis.
We begin with the news that satellite manufacturer York Space Systems plans to go public. The company filed paperwork with the Securities and Exchange Commission on Monday to go public, but did not disclose the number or price of shares it will offer. York is majority-owned by AE Industrial Partners, a private equity firm known for investments across aerospace and defense. Over the past decade, York has shifted from a small satellite specialist into one of the more prominent builders in the national security space market. Its move adds to a pipeline of space firms going public, including Voyager Technologies and Firefly Aerospace. China will launch an uncrewed Shenzhou spacecraft to the Tiangong space station next week to replace a damaged spacecraft. China is preparing the Shenzhou 22 spacecraft and a Long March 2F rocket for launch at around 11:10 p.m. Eastern November 24th, according to airspace notices. The move comes after the Shenzhou 20 crew needed to use the recently arrived Shenzhou 21 spacecraft to return home November 14th after a micrometeoroid or orbital debris strike damaged their own Shenzhou 20 spacecraft. This leaves the Shenzhou 21 astronauts apparently without a lifeboat in the case of a catastrophic emergency, such as depressurization or fire aboard Tiangong, until Shenzhou 22 arrives. A bipartisan report concludes that the United States is at risk of losing the strategic high ground of space that underpins modern military power. In a report to Congress scheduled to be released at a public event later today, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission lays out a blunt assessment of Beijing's push to become the world's top space power. The report says the speed, scale, and ambition of China's space program have entered a new phase that U.S. military leaders describe as mind-boggling. A central theme in the report is China's advantage from an entirely dual-use space program, in which companies, state-owned enterprises, and the military operate as one system. The Commission recommends that lawmakers boost Space Force funding to achieve space control and space superiority while working to better understand and simulate Chinese space threats. German satellite component company Dcubed is moving into the in-space manufacturing field. The company announced Tuesday its Iraqis product line, which will provide the ability to manufacture solar arrays in orbit with more flexibility and at lower cost than traditional arrays. A demonstration mission scheduled to launch in early 2027 will test the technology by producing a 15-meter-long solar array that can produce 2 kilowatts of power. Dcubed says arrays manufactured in space can be cheaper and lighter than those produced on the ground, which must survive the rigors of launch and then use complex deployment mechanisms. Isar Aerospace has sold a Spectrum launch to American launch aggregator SEOPS. The companies announced the deal Tuesday, covering a Spectrum launch from Norway in 2028 carrying multiple payloads. SEOPS has primarily used rideshare capacity on Falcon 9 missions for its customers, but said it is responding to customer demand for a European launch option.
Discover your next mission in the space industry with the Space News Job Exchange. Visit jobs.spacenews.com to find top aerospace roles and connect with leading employers. And for employers, use discount code JOBEX for 15% off your next purchase.
In other news, French launch startup HyPrSpace said Monday it raised 21 million euros, or $24.4 million, according to European Spaceflight. The Series A round was led by Red River West and Deep Tech 2030, with participation from several other investors. HyPrSpace is developing a hybrid propulsion system it will use first on a suborbital rocket, Baguette 1, in 2026, followed by an orbital launch vehicle, OB1. The company says the funding will allow the company to scale up operations and conduct the Baguette 1 launch while speeding up work on OB1. Kepler Communications announced that it will launch its first optical data relay satellites in January. The Canadian company said Monday that 10 of the 300-kilogram satellites will launch on a Falcon 9 from California. The satellites have multiple optical terminals for data relay services that are compatible with standards set by the Space Development Agency. The satellites also have on-orbit computing capabilities to allow for data to be processed in space.
Share your company's news with the entire space industry through Stellar Dispatch, the press release service from Space News. Learn more and use discount code SD2106 for 15% off when you submit yours at spacenews.com/stellardispatch.
An observatory proposed for Hawaii is now considering Spain, Science reports. The 30-meter telescope, TMT project said last week it is evaluating an offer by the Spanish government of 400 million euros to support construction of the observatory, provided it is built on the island of La Palma. TMT was originally intended to be built atop Mauna Kea in Hawaii, but has faced opposition from native Hawaiians and also failed to win support from the National Science Foundation. A decision on going forward with building the telescope on La Palma could come in months. The New York Times reported that Jeff Bezos is starting an AI company that could intersect with his space interests. Bezos will be co-CEO of Project Prometheus, backed by $6.2 billion in funding that came partially from him. Bezos, the founder of Blue Origin, has shown an interest in AI, including development of orbital data centers that may be needed to accommodate the field's growing ambitions. Project Prometheus will work on AI applications for engineering and manufacturing in several industries, including aerospace.